Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm going to go over some card making magic with interference ink pads. I'm using these Cloud 9 interference ink pads from Lisa Horton, and I'm going to use them with stamps. I'm also going to use them with die cuts. I've done them a few cards with them. I've done them with some layering stencils, and I created some cards before Christmas using a Christmas tree stamp, and how easy it was to get both colors from each one of the stamp pads to show up. So these are stamp pads that have interference properties with them. They look different on white than they look on black. So we're going to play around with that. And the one way I like to play around with it is using a black ink pad and stamping an area of the stamp before I stamp with the interference ink pads. Now, to stamp them on their own, I could stamp it on white paper, stamp it on black paper, and we'd have two different looks. But I love the look of them stamped together, getting both colors. I think it just looks magical. I have a soft spot for anything interference. And when something like this works like this, I just love it. So I have this large butterfly stamp here. I put that black ink in the center of the butterfly and on part of the sentiment, and then just used an ink blending brush to soften the edges. I didn't really want harsh edges to this. Once I'm done that, I'm cleaning my stamp off completely and drying it. And then I'm using the interference ink pad. And you can see immediately there's a different color where the black part of the stamped image was and the white part. So I could leave the image just alone and not do anything with it, but I thought it'd be fun to add a little bit of clear embossing powder over top of it. Just going to seal all of that ink in and just add a little bit of raised shine to it. So I poured on the clear embossing powder, and I've got my heat tool and I'm melting that powder on there, and it's really easy to see exactly what part has melted and what part hasn't. You can see that as soon as that clear embossing powder melts, the image completely brightens up. So this one here, I don't think I mentioned it. Here I'm using the Mermaid Lagoon interference ink pad. So it's got some purple where that black was, and then it's got this beautiful turquoise color. So before I put my stamp away, I'm going to clean it off, and I'm just using a baby wipe here. Wet cloth would also work. You could use stamp cleaner if you wanted, but for something super quick, it was just easy to grab a baby wipe and clean that off completely. And pretty much we have our entire card done. I cut a mat for it that was a little bit larger than my stamped image, put it on a white card base, and I'm gluing it together with some Bearly Art glue and a fine tip bottle. My favorite way to apply glue is the fine tip bottle, because you can do fine intricate die cuts, or you can glue an entire piece down. And I like to put an acrylic block on there while it's drying, just to hold everything down and flat. And you can see how quick and easy it was to create a single card, single layer, but it's beautiful. It's got those two different colors to it thanks to that interference ink pad, and I just love the shimmer that pad has. So now that we know how easy it is to create a card with just one of the interference ink pads, what if you wanted to do more than one? So I'm just going to put some temporary adhesive onto this paper. My temporary adhesive is super, super old because I use it so rarely, so it doesn't really want to go on the back of that cardstock very well, but it will work for what I need it to do. So I've got I'm going to choose 3 different butterflies here from this Flutter stamp set, and I'm going to create 3 different colors of butterflies with the different interference pads. Now I'm going to start the same way as I did the last time. I'm going to use my black ink pad, and I'm really just using the side of the ink pad or the edge of the ink pad just to color some of the areas of these butterflies with that black pad, using that same ink blending brush to soften the edges, and then I'm going to stamp it. And once again, I'm going to do this twice. I want to make sure that the areas that are black are nice and black. I want to get some good color difference between my light areas and my dark areas. And I'm just making sure to ink the black in the same areas that I had them before. So the top and the bottom butterfly I had in the center, and the center butterfly I had it on the sides of the wings. Now that I've done that, I'm going to clean off those stamps. Once again, I don't want to leave any of that black ink on there. I don't think it's going to ruin the interference ink pads, but you're going to get a little bit of contamination, and it's always best to avoid that right off the bat if we can. So same baby wipe, just cleaning off that ink, drying off the stamp because I want to make sure that those stamps can handle the interference ink that I'm going to put on there and not resist it with water. And then I'm just going to stamp and ink one butterfly at a time. So I did the top one. I got a little bit of that ink on that middle butterfly. So I made sure to clean that off and wipe it off. Once that one is completely stamped, I'm taking that stamp totally off. We don't need it anymore. We're done with it. And then I'm going to ink and stamp the second butterfly. This way I get each one of those butterflies a different color, but I don't have to worry about trying to ink stamps that are smaller than the ink pad all at once with different colors and possibly contaminating things. Once that second one is done, I clean it off, pull it off, and then I'm doing exactly the same thing to the bottom one. So the 3 pads that I'm using for this second card here were Mermaid Lagoon for the top, Tropical Paradise for the middle one, and then Teal Twist for the bottom one. Again, could leave it as it is. These inks do dry on their own and they dry fairly quickly, but I really liked the raised glossiness that embossing gave that first card. So I'm just going to do it with this one. I liked the effect of it, so we're going to go with that. Now, I didn't do it with this one, but what would be really fun would be to do a couple more butterflies on another piece of cardstock and then cut them out and have them popping up with this one. So it would have a little bit of extra dimension, a little bit more movement in it. I wanted to keep these cards simple. I wanted the interference inks to just shine on here, but you could, if you wanted to go further, you absolutely could. These shapes are fairly simple, easy enough to hand cut. There are dies available that match this stamp set, or they were available last time I looked for them, but butterfly stamps are very easy to hand cut if you don't have the dies, don't want the dies, and just want to hand cut them. They're nice and easy to do that. So in order to have a sentiment that matches, I am going to stamp it with some black ink, and then I'm just ink blending on top with an ink blending brush, one of those colors. I think it was the Teal Twist that I did. Now, the ink blending brushes that I'm using throughout this, the only one that I have that is for dye inks is the one that I'm using with my black ink pad. The other ones are ones that I'm only using with these interference pads, and I am making sure that I label them and I only use that pad with that, or that ink blending brush with that pad. You don't ever want to use a brush that has pigment ink on it on your dye-based ink pads. You will ruin them. And I'm even putting a label on each one of them so that I know exactly what colors I have there, because I really don't want to mix up the different colors in the different pads that I have. Easy enough just to use a brush with each one of them and have them set aside, and so I know exactly what pad that was for. So once I have my sentiment done, I used a mini trimmer to cut it down, and then I chose a purple cardstock that coordinated with the inks for a mat. I'm also using purple for the card base, so it's going to work perfectly. And then using that same mini trimmer for cutting around there. I like using the mini trimmer for the small sentiments. I find that I can just get a little bit more precise. The clear bar on my small trimmer is way smaller than my large trimmer, and I can just get in a little bit closer, and I just cut sentiments a lot better with it. Gluing this onto that purple card base with that same Barely Art glue, and then I'm going to glue the sentiment down flat as well. Could pop it up on some foam pop dots, but I chose not to for this one. Now I left it simple like this, but if you wanted, you could do some glossy accents on the center of the butterflies' bodies. You could also add a little bit of stickles if you wanted some glitter shimmer to go with it. I thought it looked pretty the way it is. Now the third card, I'm going to do these inks on die cuts. So I'm using the silhouette birds. My first instinct was to go with butterfly die cuts because that's what was on the other cards. But sometimes you get a little bit too narrow-minded with what you can do. And I thought by showing some bird die cuts, it would just kind of reinforce that you can use this for whatever die cuts or shapes you want to use it for. There's not just one that is right. I tend to gravitate towards butterflies, but birds will work perfectly for these ink pads as well. So I have a scrap of cardstock here, and I'm going to pick out whichever birds that I want to go on the front here and die cut them. These are nice, simple silhouette die cuts. You could use whatever you want. You could be as intricate or as simple as you want to with this. I also have some other birds that have some layered wings and stuff like that that I debated using, but I ended up opting for these. They're nice and simple, and they're going to keep the coolness of the ink pads the focus. So once I have them out of the dies, I'm going to use a waffle flower grip mat to hold them onto while I am doing my ink blending. So same as the stamps, I'm going to do some ink blending with black first. I want some of the areas to show off the interference part of the ink pad, and I want some to show off the die part of the Cloud9 ink pads. So I'm just choosing either the stomachs, the backs. I want the feet to have some of the black on it. I started with a larger ink blending brush, and then I decided to go with a detailed blending brush just because I could get a little bit easier into some of the smaller areas and not worry as much about accidentally covering most of the bird with the black. So the detailed brush for these worked a little bit better. Once I have the black on there, I'm going to use a cloth, just wipe off the excess black off the mat before I go in with those interference pads. Exactly the same reason that I cleaned off my stamps before stamping them with the interference pads. I want to make sure to keep as much cross-contamination off of them as possible. Now this grip mat is like a big solid stamp, so it holds onto those die cuts nicely. It's not so strong that you can't get the die cut off of there. You can see when I'm using the dry cloth to clean off any excess ink that die cut comes right off, but it's enough to grip it and to hold it in place so that I'm not holding it with a finger or something like that while I am trying to do ink blending on there. It holds it enough to hold it down. Now I'm using 3 different colors here. I am using Peacock Tails, Opal Blush, and then Teal Twist. And I realized after doing the 3 of them that I inadvertently chose 3 pads that have a tealy green or tealy blue look to them. So I die cut off screen a 4th bird so that I could do a different one that had a pink body. So the last one that I'm just doing the black ink now, but I'm going to put some Tropical Paradise on here. And that way I will have a bird that looks a little bit different than the other ones, because these ones ended up looking fairly simple or fairly similar. The part that's on the black is a little bit different when you tilt it into the light, but the color itself looks fairly similar. So I wanted something different with them. And you can tell with the colors of these interference ink pads that I've chosen, I clearly like blues and purples and pinks, because a lot of the ones that I've chosen, I do have other ones, but I chose ones for this particular video that have a lot of those colors with them, because I wanted to make sure that they coordinated together and didn't clash or anything. So while I have my birds done, I'm not gluing them down quite yet. I want to stamp a sentiment on the front of the card, and then I'm going to put one on the inside of the card too. So this one is from a stamp set called Crazy Talk, and the sentiment on the front of the card says, "A little birdie told me," and then on the inside I put that it's your birthday, or I think that's, yeah, it's your birthday. So I really love this set. It matches the Crazy Birds stamp sets, but I tend to go to this one a lot. There's 2 different sentiments on this set, or 2 different fonts on this set, and the thank you that I used earlier is also from this set. But that works perfectly with bird stamps as well as bird die cuts. Not everything has the little bird puns with it, but some of these are just perfect for it. So before gluing my image piece on the front of the card, I just took a thin Sharpie and just created a line. I thought it would be cute if these birds looked like they were on a power line or phone line or whatever you want to call it. And so I'm going to glue my 2 outer birds first, and then I can glue the pink one in the center of them, make sure that I have some nice spacing. And also making sure that they are sitting on the wire and not just kind of floating midair. Once I have all those done and that glue has held, I can glue that to the front of the card. While I'm waiting, rather than wasting that bird that I didn't use on the front of the card, I decided to put it on the inside of the card. And it's perfect because it has the blue body. It ties into the birds on the front and looks really cute on the inside of the card. Again, a very, very simple design, but because these ink pads are so cool and the shine that they have catches the light really nicely, I didn't think it needed to be super complex cards or really intricate. I could even have taken the bird die cuts and taken some enamel accents and put some eyes on them. I left them plain. So here we have some very simple birds and butterflies that capture the magic of interference ink pads. And you could see how simple they were to work with, as well as how easy it was to make both parts of the ink pads shine in these cards. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Have a fantastic day.